Hello, I am Quinny. Welcome to the channel. Guys, we are about to kick off the MLS preview for SoRare to end them all. I hope you enjoyed the little sneak peek we just had with Surface to Air Missile. I had a lot of fun recording with him. In this episode, guys, we've got Andrew at RotoWire, we've got Jhod, we've got SoRare USA, we've got Martin Cooper, and we've got the man himself, Surface to Air Missile, joining us, taking us through these 5 clubs. I really hope you enjoy it, guys. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. There's going to be another 4 episodes after this covering all the clubs. Like, subscribe, share, retweet, all that good stuff, guys, and let's get stuck into it. Now, as you guys will know, I've been trying to assemble the Avengers of the MLS SoRare community. I recently seen Andrew at RotoWire here did another podcast on SoRare featuring SoRare data. That was fantastic, and I thought I've got to get this guy involved in the Avengers. So Andrew, thanks very much for joining us. Thanks for joining the channel.
No, thanks so much for having me. I've been a watcher for a long time, so it's a pleasure to be able to finally come on with you.
Well, thanks very much, Andrew. Now, I'm really looking forward to having you on. I'm really looking forward to getting your take on some of these teams. Now, the very first team we're actually going to go through is a name that will be familiar even to the MLS novice. Where the first team we're looking at, if I can get the screen sorted, is we're taking a look at the LA Galaxy. Now, if you're a novice to MLS, LA Galaxy is going to be one of the first teams you probably look at. You're probably expecting to find some stars in there. You're probably expecting to find some young prospects, some DPs or whatever. But this is not the Galaxy most people will be familiar with. You know, there's no Ibrahimovic, there's no Beckham, there's no Robbie Keane, no Gerrard, any of these guys. And from an SO5 perspective, they're quite slim pickings. But with that in mind, there is always an opportunity to be had when other people notice this also and they start to turn away and maybe start to look for bargains at other clubs. But please do bear in mind, you're not buying into the Galaxy of old at the moment, are you, Andrew?
No. I was going to say, this is not your father's LA Galaxy. All the big players that you kind of expect to see at a club like this are long gone, and they didn't replace them with guys that are all that popular. Apologies to those who love Chicharito, but he's just not on the same level as for all the people who, he's not Ibrahimovic, he's not Robbie Keane. And so it's like guys like that who, obviously David Beckham, that there have been some very, very big names at this club previously, and they're kind of turning over a new leaf this year. And so when you're used to seeing superstars on this team and you're like, oh, I'm going to go get those guys, you're going to have to look somewhere else if you're looking for superstars.
Now, probably the starting point for most managers when they're going through these clubs and trying to analyse them and whatnot is looking at the goalkeeper situation, is looking at the defence, because the goalkeeper and the defence can be the cheapest and most expensive acquisitions. LA don't have a real clear out-and-out number one. There's big question marks over there. And then when you look at the defence, we're lacking an exciting attacking fullback. We're really lacking a dominant centre-back. The only real name that really jumps out to me is like a Danny Harao, if that's how you even say it. But there's not, even for a team that is bereft of stardom, you would expect there to be a solid defence. But it's just a lot of kind of middle of the road guys, nothing too exciting. Andrew, what's your take on the LA defence?
I think that's going to be kind of a common theme with the Galaxy, is you're going to feel like you know who the better player is amongst a group, whether it's the defenders, the midfielders, the forwards. And there's always going to be this like, but he's actually not that good. So I agree with you that Araujo is probably the guy that you would want in the back. But the way that it's been fairly recently that I've gotten into stacking. And so if you get into this idea that like if you want the Galaxy goalkeeper, then you should figure out who the defender is to get with him. I think Araujo is probably the most exciting in terms of upside. But like Daniel Steres is probably in the middle, and like he's fine. Like he's going to be one of those guys that like probably will start enough matches where you can get some value out of him if you're trying to play for the threshold. But this entire kind of back line is just like okay, and they also have what feels like 75 goalkeepers who could possibly win the job, and none of them are on SoRare yet, so we can't even speculate of who they are. I figure by the time that the cards are out, we'll know who the starter is. So at least we're not like buying cards blindly like there are a few other teams that people are doing. But yeah, I think Araujo, I think that's the right call, of at least along the back line for a player that like has decent upside. That's where you go. But again, it's like he's the best of a group that isn't really that great.
And it's a very similar story when you kind of look at the midfield. Now, there's not that much depth there. They've brought in Sasha Kleshin, they've brought in Victor Vasquez. The new manager that's came in, Greg Vanny, knows some of these guys. He's been around the league for a while. You put a wee bit of faith in that. But the midfield, it doesn't really inspire much confidence, you know.
Well, you could put it that way,
sure. So we've got guys like Joe DeSantos, we've got Sasha Kleshin, we've got Sebastian Lletget, who we don't have a card for yet, and I think he's probably the only one that's probably worth having a card for at this point. I'm obviously myself quite optimistic and quite bullish on Efra Alvarez doing well this year, but that is a gamble, and you know that's just something I'm going to have to roll with through the season, and hopefully that pans out. But with the midfield in here, you know, it's an obvious combination of like Dos Santos, maybe Lletget and Alvarez, or maybe you're thinking about the Vasquez and the Kleshin. Maybe they both play like 30 minutes each, or 45 minutes, depending on how they run it. But there's nothing really tied into this midfield. There's no Pozuelo level player, there's no Ladero level player. But again, it's just kind of the same thing with Galaxy as it was in the defence as in the midfield. There's some decent, okay guys there. But without having a Lletget, you know, there's nothing really in there to write home about. You know, there's nothing I get too excited about, except for my optimism around the one, the only, the boy for Alvarez. You know, in terms of the midfield for you, Andrew, when you can have a glance at that, what's the kind of things that jump out to you? What's your kind of thoughts about all that?
I think the encouraging thing about Alvarez is that he's young, and I believe he just got his full international debut. So, like, I think he's definitely the guy that you want to target if you're thinking more long term. The problem is he's kind of priced up, at least recently. You know, I thought 0.2, 0.3, 0.4 ETH is not nothing for a guy who may not even start the season in the starting lineup. So, but he might actually be one of their better players. It's just like if you have the kind of the bankroll to pay that and then wait until he gets in. But yeah, Lletget is probably going to be their main set piece taker. It was Pavone for a decent amount of last season, but he's not here, so Lletget will take over. He's definitely the best option that they have. We also just don't have his cards yet, and there's no guarantee we get them. Like, that's kind of the weird thing about MLS. Also, with the deal with the MLS Players Association, we don't know if the next season's cards will be with the league itself or individual teams, but the interesting thing about the MLS Players Association is that their players can opt out of it. And a lot of them do that because they want to keep their image rights. And so that's why a lot of kind of key players come over and we don't get their MLS cards because they don't actually join the Players Association. So Lletget is one of them. He was in the league last year. We should have had his card because theoretically he's there, but we don't have his card, and we don't know for sure if we'll have it again, if we'll have it this year. So that's kind of a bummer because he's the guy that we probably want, at least amongst that group. Vasquez is an interesting one. He's also doesn't have his card yet, although he hasn't been in the league in a few years. He was basically, I'll put it, a poor man's Pozuelo when he was in Toronto. He pretty much took all of their set pieces and was kind of their most dynamic player. This was a few years ago, so please don't think you're getting a Pozuelo if you're somehow buy a Victor Vasquez card. But it seems like Vasquez and Kleshin are probably going to compete for some sort of central role. Vasquez is more of an attacking player. Kleshin will probably play next to Dos Santos, kind of in that holding midfield. I prefer Dos Santos to Kleshin just because he's a little younger. Kleshin, despite the fantastic mustache, that's probably the best part of his card and not necessarily his SO5 scores. So yeah, Lletget, if we can get him, would certainly be the guy to target. And then I'm not sure how much you're getting out of Vasquez, but maybe there's some sort of late career bloom that we can find.
Yeah, totally. Now, when you come on to look at the forwards, unfortunately, it's quite slim pickings there as well. Beyond Chicharito, there's not really much I would get too excited about from a SoRare perspective if you're dipping into the market. There's a few rotation options, a few young guys maybe floating around, but it does all really hinge on Chicharito himself, you know. I'm quite hopeful that he's going to have a good season. I'm quite hopeful that he's going to get 10 plus goals. I think he's going to start every game. I've seen him in the off season. He's had a kid and stuff like that. He's settled in, and I think he's one of these guys that is going there to cement a reputation, to cement a bit of a legacy. So I'm hopeful they can do well. I wouldn't put any more money on it than the cost of the Chicharito I already have, but I think if Galaxy are going to do anything, they're going to need the goals out of this guy.
I will say that if you believe that they're going to be better than even like the bookmakers don't have them as really competing for MLS Cup, if you think they're going to be good, then they're probably good because of Chicharito. Like, they can't have a good season if he doesn't have a good season. So there's at least that you can put on it, that it almost works the opposite. Like, you would think if Chicharito has a good season, then the Galaxy will. But it's actually, if the Galaxy can put it together, and Greg Vanney's a very good coach. He obviously had plenty of success in Toronto. If he can figure this out, it will probably lead to very good things for Chicharito. So I'll say that positive thing for you.
Boom. So the next team we're going to have a look at is San Jose Earthquakes. Now, I was just saying to you, Jeremy, I've got this kind of historical bias from my kind of viewing of MLS, and San Jose are just not really a team I've ever given much attention to. They've got some storied history, you know, with different players and different achievements they've had over the times, but I've never seen a big player go there that's excited me. I've never really seen them really take charge of the league and the division on a consistent basis. Last year they were pretty dreadful. Almeida is still in charge for this year. You would think, you know, they would improve on next year, but when you kind of look at the squad, and especially we're thinking about it from an SO5 perspective, there's not too much meat on the bones with San Jose. Would you agree with that?
I would. I have in my notes here, I wouldn't touch this team. So, I mean, to each their own. I think Jackson Ewell, their midfielder, he's reasonable. Still wouldn't probably pick him up, to be honest with you. The only person I saw that of note is their goaltending situation, because you might get 1 year out of Marcinkowski. I think he's one of the only U23 eligible players that could actually, like, you know, that could actually help you in a U23 situation, though.
Yep.
Goalies right now are already at pretty high prices, so I don't know if you necessarily go out and spend it on San Jose. Like you said, a team they're a very much middling team. I think they only have the one designated player. I think it's Espinoza. I think I even got confused with the Espinoza who plays for Sporting KC, not to be honest with you. Like, I feel like I know MLS, and I'm like, yeah, this is a West Coast team, you know, middling marketplace. One DP who I'm not even certain of. I don't think he has cards. Yeah, that's about it from me. Maybe there'll be a surprise somewhere, but I own 0 Earthquakes, and I don't anticipate picking up any Earthquakes soon.
Fair enough. I think probably the most exciting card outside the thing with Marcinowski, as you kind of said there, if any of you at home watching this are not aware, under 23 goalkeepers in MLS are pretty much do not exist this season. You know, Thomas Hassel, we'll talk about Vancouver shortly, but Thomas Hassel probably won't be starting, and outside of that, you know, there's no other goalkeeper that hits under 23. So if under 23 division is open and you're looking for a goalkeeper in MLS, Marcinowski is pretty much your best bet at getting some minutes consistently over the season. There's a few other guys that might come in when international teams are taking away guys abroad and whatever for qualifiers and tournaments and that sort of thing, but outside of Marcinowski, the other one most people will probably be excited about seeing this year would be Cade Cowell. Had a bit of a breakout year last year, was kind of, you know, I don't know if it was just the fact that they were so dull otherwise, it made him look extra exciting, but he's young, he's getting involved in goals in the team, and he's definitely somebody to keep an eye on, I would say.
Yeah, I'd probably leave it at that. It's a good team to kind of scout. As you mentioned, like, the goaltending, like, I could see that possibly winning you a week if no one else is playing that. That'd be kind of like the outsider kind of like shot there. It's just, I don't know if I'd be spending a fortune to get him, but like, if you ever won a player like Marcinkowski, like that'd be like awesome. But yeah, I don't know. I think that's more a team similar to Austin that I would probably just take a wait and see approach to them, right? Like, if someone actually starts showing consistent form on either the Earthquakes or, you know, an expansion team like Austin, then yeah, maybe pick them up at that point. I wouldn't rush out to, like, there's no one that I can really see rushing out for.
The only other player I would maybe make comment on is Carlos Fierro. wee Mexican forward that plays for them. He's a name that's familiar to me, maybe other people out in the audience, from Football Manager when he was like 18 or something like that. I'm pretty sure this guy had like 20 for finishing, and you could get him super cheap from Mexico. So I recognise his name because of that. It might not be Mexico, it might have been a Spanish team, but it might have been Arsenal. I don't know if I've just made that up. But so he's a little name that I recognise. He did get some good form towards the back end of the season. I'm looking at his SO5 scores at the moment. And over the last, I don't know, let's say 10 matches, he must have got, or maybe even 12 matches, he's got about 5 greens, 1 DNP, 1 red, and then the rest are orange, of course. So, and the kind of price he's hovering about the market at, it's kind of around that price that your lower end MLS striker, so he's right in amongst it in terms of market value. But he is a guy that probably has a wee bit of a discount on him because of all the DNPs he picked up last year and all the red scores. So obviously do your research on the DNPs, why they were happening. But potentially you could have somebody there who might get to 10 goals, and if they was to do that over maybe, because the thing as well, and you'll know this, Jeremy, as well as any other football fan, but if a striker's going to go out and bag, let's say 10 goals in a season, it's not one every week, sporadically, evenly spread over the season. Some guys might hit hot as soon as the season starts. They grab a brace on day 1, and then day 2 they get a goal, and that kind of thing. So depending on when this guy's goals come, you'll probably find maybe 40% of them might come in a little chunk together. And if you can maximise that, then you've got a good wee opportunity to maybe buy cheap, sell high, as well as getting some SO5 joy along the way, potentially.
Yeah, no, I'd agree. I think it's one of those ones where if you're patient and you're doing your research, I think you can do well. Like as long as you're kind of monitoring the games. I know with the time difference in Europe, these like West Coast games will be painful for people to try to follow, which actually kind of hurts the West Coast team. Actually, it hurts the West Coast teams here in North America as an Eastern time zone person. I don't even like staying up for those games, let alone people in Europe, staying up all hours to watch the San Jose Earthquakes, which I don't know how many people want to do that. But you will find that once the big leagues in Europe are done and people can kind of like change their mindset to see what's going on in MLS, I think you could definitely, like you said, see who's kind of catching fire on a team like San Jose, or at least who's putting in like a consistent like shift, and use them. Again, I don't think I'd rush out because I just don't see the value yet. But that's not to say that, come July and August, once, the pandemic might be handling better, you've got some consistent games under their belts, you see who's actually the starters, might not be a bad pickup at that point.
Yeah, definitely. I'm just looking at Jackson Yule's scores. At the price he's going for now, I dare say he's a fair bargain, around the 0.12-ish mark. And his last 40 average, or his last 15 average is 50, I beg your pardon. But yeah, good solid team. And the last thing I'll say about the Quakes, and we'll kind of leave them where they are. But Almeida, if you're familiar with European football, just imagine Simeone, because that's just kind of what's going on. Just keep it tight, keep it dirty, try and win 1-0. If worst case scenario, draw 0-0. That's the kind of game plan that he was deploying last year. It might change this year, I would doubt it. But when you're trying to imagine what the key players in the team will look like, that's the kind of guy he is, and that's the sort of mould that team was in last season. Certainly, it stands to reason it would be this season also. Now, the next team we're going to come on to is Portland. Okay, now again, kind of similar to what I've been saying to you, Richard, with our clubs, is my kind of perception of Portland for me is like one of these clubs that I'm never really that excited about. Again, they're never covered in DPs and glory and talismanic players, but they always do well. They always finish top 5, top 4. They always go far. They always give teams a really hard game. And we were talking about Colorado for altitude or whatever, but I know the Timbers, just for the atmosphere, they are a very tough team to play against away. They've got a very vibrant fan base, and they've had a lot of success over the last couple of years with MLS Cups and good runs and all that kind of thing. But they're one of these teams that if you do come into MLS as a neutral, at first glance you won't look at this team, and then after some games get played and some fixtures roll in, you will look at them again and go, how did I miss that? Because they are so solid top to bottom. That's just my impression, certainly, anyway. As we kind of look at the team, again, they're not covered in big stars or anything like that, but they've got a lot of solid players in virtually every position. They do look a bit thin on this website I'm on the now, but
Yeah.
even with the players they do have, they're all relatively seasoned pros, all quite reliable. I think the only card I've got is the goalkeeper at the moment, Clark.
Clark, nice, yeah.
I think that's the only one I've got. Diego Valeri, of course, is a bit of a legend in the league. Just for how well he's done over the years with Portland. He won MVP once, maybe twice, if memory serves me. I can't remember. But I think probably I'm looking forward to hear your opinion on this. But I think from an SO5 perspective, the card that most people are looking forward to seeing getting on the pitch for Portland is probably Felipe Mora. Never played last year. He's been really under the radar for a forward. Has a big price tag. Has a big reputation from Mexico. So they did struggle for a talisman last year. He could be it. Jeremy Ebobisse did well. There's a few other guys that did well last year. But I think Mora is the one that most people will be looking for. How you're talking about last 5 scores earlier with Bassett. Mora could be one of these guys after 5 scores. He's banging in goals, and before you know it, he's a 1 ETH card.
Yep. It's just they grow up so fast. It's just like, but I think if you're neutral and if you're like looking for a team in MLS, imagine a team that there's a guy with a chainsaw in the stadium behind the goal, and every time they score, he takes his chainsaw and literally cuts a log of wood. Timbers Joey, if you want to Google him or YouTube him. That in itself is one reason to get into Portland. Like, we can talk about coffee, we can talk about hipsters, talk about like a nice stadium, but God, incredible. That's like classic America to me.
They let
Just
one of
the
the
guy
fans
with
come in the
chainsaw.
stadium with a chainsaw. It's like official club business. You need that chainsaw, and you come. Let's put you in the front row with a chainsaw.
It's incredible.
So
But yeah, like even SO5 eyes, like you mentioned, like Valeri, absolute like legend in the league, the number 1 guy. I think he's getting on 34 right, like this year.
Yeah.
So I like in this situation, you don't want to be like he could have another good year, but you also don't want to be the one that gets him on his first bad year. Say he gets rotated a bunch or like sits out a bunch of games, doesn't hit more than 2,000 minutes. Probably not ideal. But I think he's priced at a fair discount given that, compared to like other guys that play in those 10 spots. But yeah, and then I mean, there's a bunch. They have new fullbacks, which I don't think either of them have cards though. It's like Claudio Bravo on the left, and then Van Rankin. Sounds very Dutch.
Yeah.
Van Rankin.
He's a Mexican apparently, but yeah, he's got a very Dutch name.
Oh, shit, yeah.
But apparently, according to this website I'm on, he's Mexican.
Oh, there you go. Rankin. Yeah, so those two could be good shouts once they're actually like in the game. They got some injuries currently, so Valeri was an MVP in the past. Sebastian Blanco, he was MVP last year in the MLS like tournament. They did like a little like MLS's back tournament.
Yeah.
Then he tore his ACL. So he's on recovery, on track. Probably let's call it May conservatively. So might miss the first couple of weeks, but that's one card I picked up like super cheap a while ago. Just kind of holding, similar to, might have missed the bus on Mora. I don't know. Would you say like still opportunity there, or you got more experience?
I've not followed his price for the last couple of weeks, but I know for ages it was. I'm just going to type him in. We'll see what he's trading at the moment. But I know for ages it was buttons. Like absolute buttons. I was close to buying a super rare or 2 of them just because that's how cheap it was going for. But I don't think that'll be possible now. Yeah, well, there's only 2 on the secondary market. One's listed for an ETH and one's listed at 0.4. These are people just hoping that you're desperate for a striker, because he hasn't proved anything yet. We expect that he'll be one of the main guys, but the proof is in the pudding, as they say. You can't bank on it until it comes in. I actually won a Diego Chara. I've sold him recently,
Nice.
but Diego Chara at the age of 34, like he is evergreen. He should play every game still, give or take.
Yep.
And he's a box-to-box midfielder. So him and Diego Valeri, as long as they drink the same tap water, I think they might be fine this year. In that front, but you're definitely right. With these older players, you are worried about the first season they become phased out, where they don't become, the primary playmaker or emphasis of the team. The manager of Portland, for any of you that don't know, is a guy called Gio Savarese. He's a bit of an MLS legend himself. He's won MLS Cups and he's done some good stuff in his career when he was a player. So he's somebody that knows the league really well. And when I see, you were talking about Bravo and Van Rankin, when I look at the transfers, Richard, and I see the incomings, when I kind of know who the manager is in that sense. He knows the region really well. He's like Venezuelan or something like that himself also. But when they start to bring in players from, like your Van Rankins come in from Guadalajara, which is also in Mexico, if any of you don't know, I trust a guy like that with signings like that he knows the guys he's bringing in. They've been well scouted to some extent. And like I said at the tip off of this, like Portland are one of these clubs that if you're neutral, you'll look at them once and you'll go, nah, nothing there. But then when we get 20 games in and you see they've only lost 3 times, you know, or whatever it might be, you can quickly, you know, turn your opinion on that. For me, the only card I'm actively hunting down from Portland is Eric Williamson. Really exciting little box to box ball winning midfielder. He's trading now. Whenever I'm trying to get him on auctions, he's getting up to 0.14ish. I'm trying to get him for about 0.1. I'm trying to be. My problem with some of these cards is I'm very stingy. I'm always trying to get the best price I can, and then we were talking about this with another player. We'll talk about him in a moment, but sometimes you try to chase that unicorn. You're never going to catch him for 0.1, so you might as well just fucking pay the 0.12 or whatever. But for me, I think this guy's got a really exciting year ahead. In midfield, he's one of the guys that should play most of the matches for Portland, and the sort of player that he is, he scores well in SO5. He's not reliant on a goal. He's not reliant on an assist. You know, he's just reliant on playing 90 minutes really, and the team playing well. You know, his passes are getting completed, his tackles are getting completed, etc. He's had a lot. I didn't actually realise, but he had on loan in Portugal for a year or two, so he's got a wee bit of European.
Nice.
I don't know, experience, for lack of a better word.
Yeah, 'cause he's still he's like 22, like pretty young still.
Yeah, this thing I'm on says
he's U23 for sure.
He's he's U23. So this thing I'm on says he's 23 at the moment, but for SO5 he's U23.
Yeah.
And with this Olympics qualifying that America have just undertaken, he wasn't even in the squad, and I've seen a bit of an outcry for that, and I can totally understand why.
Yep.
Is there anyone else in the Portland squad, Richard, you're excited about, or you would keep a close eye on?
Yeah, I mean Diego Chara. There's also another charge. Jimmy Chara.
Yep.
Probably for those who follow me on Twitter, he's my roommate's greatest hope currently.
Oh really?
I think my roommate picked him up for like 0.15. He, given Blanco is out, given Niesgoda is another one that's currently on the sidelines with an ACL tear.
Yep.
Him on the right wing, like goal, assist. I'm not sure what their opening fixtures are, but if there's anything favorable in there, like that could be another one of those guys that just like hits the ground running. Fairly like nailed on compared to perhaps the other side of the pitch where it's like Aspria, Ebobise. I'm pronouncing it wrong, but that's a guy that I'm pretty excited about. I also have Williamson. Funny you say that. Like, I'm the opposite. I have no patience for like, kind of going for like, if it's 0.12, 0.125, 0.13, like, I'm probably one of the like worst people in terms of overpaying for cards.
Oh really?
So I got Williamson for his price that he's at currently for like a month ago. So.
Fair enough. Well, I kind of wish
it's about it.
Yeah, I kind of wish I made some moves like that as well. But with some cards, I'm like you, Richard, where I've got no patience. I'm like, I want it and I'm getting it now, and that's the end of it. And some cards, I tell myself, this is one to be patient with. You will get a wee bit of a better price. It's not a big figure in the limelight. It's somebody that's maybe a wee bit more of an unknown. Looking at Portland's opening fixtures, Richard, just to kind of answer your question, I would fancy them to do quite well. First 5 games, away to Vancouver, at home to Houston, away to Dallas, at home to Seattle, and then away to San Jose. A wee bit of chopping and changing between home and away, but in terms of 5 opening fixtures, Seattle is a derby, it's a big match, anything can happen. But Houston and Vancouver and San Jose, they're 3 very attractive fixtures.
To say the least.
Yeah.
That's incredible. Like, because Vancouver, they're not playing in Canada, so all the Canadian teams are starting the season kind of across MLS. So I think Vancouver is in Salt Lake City, so they're not even in their home stadium. So that's kind of like neutral grounds there. Yeah, that's incredible. I'm gonna tell my roommate later. He's gonna like be even more excited. Jimmy Chara,
Yeah, that's it. But I say Vancouver were definitely one of these teams where I've never really had much faith in them. So if you're opening your season with Vancouver, I'd say that's a good draw to get.
Yeah, I mean, like Houston, Vancouver, San Jose, kind of like, I think they're all in the top or bottom 5 teams given like the outlook.
Yeah.
So that's really, really promising. So if you have Steve Clark, like, you're probably happy man right now.
Get some of those clean sheets, definitely, man. So, Surface, I said this to you before. I might even said it in the intro. It's actually escaping me right now because we've been chatting so long. But when I was thinking about doing this series, you were the first name that came to my mind in terms of somebody, you know, to come on and, you know, have a good SoRare experience with MLS kind of stint on it. But also the team I was most looking forward to talking about is NYC, because that's the team I'm really backing most of the time this season in particular, even though there's not really much to especially back them against. But as I look at your depth chart here, it basically tells everything that I kind of thought already of the team, just with my kind of watching from afar. There's only one striker in this team at the moment, and that is Castellanos. It's just been confirmed, I think 2 days ago, yesterday maybe, Palmeiras are not pursuing the transfer any further.
Yes.
So, if you've been kind of sitting waiting for developments on that, I sold my Castellanos when the rumour first emerged because I just wasn't. I bought I know, a quarter of a coin as well, and I done it. I just didn't. If he goes to Brazil when he did well, that'd have been fine. But I didn't buy him for that. I bought him for MLS. I bought him for New York City, and now I've got a wee bit of egg on my face because I sold him for a quarter of a coin, and there's no chance I'm going to get him back at that price.
It's part of the game. It happens to all of us all the time.
It does indeed.
Yeah.
When you look at this, I look at this team quite often, right? When you look at that team, right, as a SoRare kind of semi-neutral kind of perspective, what jumps out to you as the most exciting section of that team or the most exciting player position?
Well, okay, I think first we got to talk about the news from today, though. So they had a major signing today.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they got Alfredo Morales from Germany.
Nice.
And he was on Fortuna Düsseldorf, I think.
Yep.
So, yeah, I mean, that's a pretty big signing. I think that he's definitely, you know, slotted into, he's going to play. And so I think it totally actually shakes up the whole depth chart to some degree and the interesting players and what's going on. And needs a little bit of time to process it to really kind of understand, you know, what it means. But it definitely changes things. But to me, honestly, the exciting player is Castellanos, because after Haber got injured last year and he came on, I mean, he was top one of the top forwards in the league. It was somewhat buoyed by one amazing, but I mean, he scored after Haber got injured. He basically took over the starting job. I mean, he scored. It was something like, I have it right here, 7 goals and 2 assists in 9 games. So I mean, that'll play. I mean, that's tops in MLS. That's great numbers. So he's exciting for sure. He's the one I'm watching the most. Now, the other one that I like a lot is Parks, and partly because I just have a affinity because I wanted one of his cards early. And New York was one of the teams I watched, one of the East Coast teams I watched the most of last year, them in Toronto. And I guess I don't consider Columbus an East Coast team. They're really middle of the country to me. Yeah. But you know, just Parks really kind of came into his own last year. He got really strong. You know, started playing more, started playing better, started playing smart football. It didn't always translate to amazing SoRare scores, but he was pretty solid, and he's, you know, under 23. And, you know, he's slated to play, although now I'm interested to see how Morales affects the back line of him and or the mid line of him and Sands. Now, obviously, Ring leaving is huge. You know, he's been the heart of the team, you know, one of the hearts of the team besides Morales, who was injured for, I think, all but 10 games last season. He played about, yeah. You know, he's been the heart of the team for the last 5 years. Yeah. So him leaving it's gonna look different. And, you know, they had some other departures. You know, Mataria left as well, and Haber's going to be injured. They lost Matria last year, you know, mid-season. So, you know, who do you think is going to be captain going in? If you had to guess.
I think captain will be Mickey Morales. I think he'll stay captain. Maybe he gives it to somebody like Tinnerholm.
Okay.
Maybe Shano, but I think one of those. I think somebody who's been there for a long time will be captain. I actually listened to a podcast that Ronnie Dyla, the manager, done. I listened to it earlier this week. It's only about a 15-minute podcast. It's not long. And one thing he said, actually, which was really interesting and I found quite surprising,
he was talking about moving on guys like Ring and Matarita, and he was saying that because those guys who have been here for so long have left, and at the same time, it's a little bit of a weakness, right? But they've filled up, they've brought up a lot of young players. Guys like, just looking at the depth chart, guys like Gray, guys like Jason, guys like Zelalem, Justin Hack. There's a bunch of guys moving up through the ranks there now. So what he said was actually quite telling, but it made it sound like some of these guys were kind of, what you can get with some older footballers on occasion is they kind of hang on to their battle wounds, and they don't open themselves up to maybe learning new tactics, going through new experiences, that kind of thing. So I think we might actually see a New York City that's much more engaged tactically with the manager. Being a Celtic fan, Ronnie Dyler used to be the manager for us, so I've got a good idea of what that looks like. It will be really similar to what you've seen last year from them, but I think tactically and technically they'll probably go up a little level. I think the players that are still there, the players that were there last year, will be a bit more onboarded with the process and the football they're going to play. I don't know how they get through the season with only Castellanos up front. And I actually echo everything you were just saying, Surface, because when I was watching NYC, Castellanos looked really good when he played. Like, technically, I thought he always had the good. I thought he might try and make a pass or make a shot that goes off target or doesn't, get completed. But he had a lot of really good ideas for the pass and for the shot, and he had good vision and awareness, which I really, really liked. I did have a question mark over him, but because some of the goals and some of those passes were a bit wasteful, so his decision making then comes into it. But again, similar to what we were saying earlier on when we were chatting, that sometimes that kind of thing I was talking about with Busio, just it might seem like it's something that doesn't directly correlate into good football performances, but somebody who, one stat, what I'm kind of dancing around here, Surface, I'll just spit it out. See the stat, big chance missed. I think we all understand that carries a value. It's actually positive, that they've been in the position to miss the chance. So it was kind of that angle. The things weren't all coming off for him, but some of the things he was trying, you can tell, if he's in a team that are on the same wavelength as him, etc., you might actually find a big uplift in his output in terms of assists and goals, and the stats you quoted are already considerable, so I've got good hopes for him, but he needs backup, he needs rotation, he will need a rest at some point.
Yeah, I totally agree with that analysis. I think that he could potentially be a top 5 forward in MLS this season if he gets enough goals and assists. I mean, if he gets enough decisive actions, it's going to play. And I think excited to see what happens. I'm excited to have his unique going into the season. And, obviously I'm going to be rooting hard for him. They had a preseason game a couple days ago, and I don't know if you saw the results. Castellanos got sent off. But he scored a goal first, and he had another one. He almost scored a brace in the first half, and Jason replaced him at the 9. I don't know if that's telling for anything going into the season, but that's what happened in the preseason game, I think.
Nice.
So we'll see if that we'll see what happens. I mean, maybe they'll still try to get somebody.
I've got my eyes on a lot of these players for when they come out next year. Jason's definitely one of them, and it's kind of a little bit of my bugbear sometimes with when the cards come out, because if these, if they maybe did the new season maybe a month ahead of time, I would have picked up some of these guys before they played any preseason games and before the hype train starts. But now we're maybe in a situation where some of these guys that break out in preseason, by the time they get a card, they're not a secret anymore, and you're going to have to pay normal prices for them. You don't really get that opportunity for a discovery price, where you're the one that's unearthed them and you're like, oh, I only got him for $40 or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, from what I read, Gray had an excuse me. I'm sorry about that. Gray had an amazing preseason game, and he's still relatively cheap. So I'm going to go out and get one of them after this video before it airs.
I've been hunting down Tavon Gray quite publicly on my streams for about a month, and I've been trying to get him. I've been trying to get him for about like 0.04, give or take, and then somebody always just kind of bumps up a wee bit. And I don't want to pay too much for him because he's not going to be first choice. He will be rotational, but he's so young. He does have good potential.
He could be, but the thing is that New York is such an interesting team because they're really one of the great SoRare teams because just their style just lends well to good scoring. I mean, Chanot and Timmer were amazing defensive players last year for the game. They're definitely top 10 starters, and Johnson was fantastic, and they were strong in the midfield as well. Medina is interesting because people in the community are high on him because he ended the season so strong. I mean, look at his last 5 scores; they're all set. He's driven his prices insane, and it's extremely high. And the question is he going to be that good again this year? I don't know. I'm not sure. It seems like he's one I avoided and trying to pick up, even though he had a high L5 for sure.
Well, I picked up my Medina quite early on in last season, and it was so frustrating right up until maybe the last like 7 or 8 games. I know the last 5 was incredible. It was really frustrating, and do you know what a big difference was for those scores that were really improving? It was he was getting goal contributions. He is getting assists and goals in those scores if you look and analyse them. So similar to again what we were speaking about with some players, they need to have something to get those scores. The thing I like about Medina is he's versatile. So again, looking at his depth chart, it kind of lends itself to that. Again, your depth chart here has him at left wing, right wing, and at number 10 potentially. And I think he'll play a lot this year. And as long as because I think him, Castellanos, Morales, a lot of these guys, they look good when they played together, and the longer they played together, when Mickey Morales came back into the team, that's when you see Medina's form go up a level. So I'm hopeful. I would be cautious as you are, definitely, but I'm hopeful.
I would love to have his super rare. I mean, so New York was first in shots on target last year, with Herba out on injury to start the season, and Matria gone. They're an exciting team. They're going to be shooting a lot. I think he's a great card to have. That's also why I'm excited, high on Parks. I hope he takes a bit more chances up front with sneaks up front a little bit more, and then we'll see how Morales comes back from injury. Although now there's 2 Moraleses, so one with a Z, one with an S. So it's going to be complicated. It looks like there's a lot of talk about Sands and potentially leaving at some point too. And I wonder if the Morales pickup was maybe some foreknowledge about Sands eventually leaving. Not really sure.
Yeah. Definitely.
But
because on that note, I actually really like the look of Acevedo, who they signed last year. Hasn't really played much, but he had some pedigree. So I think you might be right. I think there might be a bit of forward planning involved here.
Yeah, I mean it's weird because it seems like pundits are kind of wondering if they're really going to be able to stay in at the top of the Eastern Conference. They were 5th last year. From what I'm reading, like people are saying maybe a tiny bit of a step back, and I'm not totally sure, but they were first in they were 4th best in goals allowed and 7th in goals. So it seems like they actually didn't their record wasn't as good as it should have been. That indicates to me that they had a couple of blowouts, I guess, where they scored a lot, and then they had a few more losses than they should have. We'll see. I mean, there's still a top 8 team in the East to me for sure, and obviously having playoff players is that it's great for when they get to the end, and just in general, stronger players is better. People on stronger teams is better. They have a brutal May. They start the season off okay, but then in May they have to play Philly, Orlando, Toronto. Then they play Columbus and then LAFC. I mean, it's like an insane 5-game stretch.
That is horrible. NYC, in my experience, don't do well in those runs, and see what you kind of explained there in terms of how you've analysed the stats. That's actually really, really true. If NYC didn't get into a lead last season, or they didn't score the first goal or whatever, then the game would be really tight and very dicey. But the games where they could score in the first 10 minutes or whatever, it would be a goal fest, and they'd probably win, So they definitely have that duality of hot and cold. Last year, who knows what this season will bring. Now, as I was just saying to you, Martin, like in the time I've watched MLS, the Philadelphia Union is not a team I have ever been excited about, never really held much affection for, or any sort of real expectations of winning many football matches. But they've got their act together over the last couple of years, and last season in particular, they had a real crescendo of academy talent coming through with consistent coaching. Jim Curtin's been there for so long. Guys like Kai Wagner were stepping up. They did really well last year. A lot of people are worried that they're not going to repeat the form that they had last year, having sold Brendan Aronson and Mark McKenzie. They have brought some guys in, like the boy Flack from St. Pauli. They've brought Stuart Finlay in from Kilmarnock, who I know is actually a really, really good defender, and I expect him to do well in MLS. But they're relying on guys like Fontana to step up. They're hoping Bedoya can go again for another season, as well as guys like Sergio Santos and a few other guys that were big question marks last year that did actually have a good season. The question marks return. Will they do it again? What do you think?
I think that they're still going to be a playoff team. I don't think they'll reach like the Supporters' Shield level, obviously, that they did last season. But I'm still pretty excited for the prospects of this team. I mean, they have elite attackers with Prisbilko and Santos. That front two is pretty nice. The two fullbacks I'm pretty excited about. Pretty similar to Atlanta for me, with two young fullbacks with Wagner and Bizo. I mean, and you saw the CONCACAF. I don't know if you saw the CONCACAF Champions League game yesterday. And
All I seen was the
Bizo
fight
just
that
put in.
happened.
Bizo put in like a perfect cross for Prisbilko to head in. So I mean, I'm pretty excited to have Bizo on my team
I would
at
be
a
as
cheap
well.
price.
I'm just looking at his scores now. They're very attractive, very appealing. 2 reds, 100 in there, which I love. 2 90 pluses. Guys with some really good scores. The price, I don't think there can be many on the market, because the cheapest one at the moment is just under 0.8 of a full coin, you know. So don't think there's actually that many for sale, and that's always a good sign, you know. People aren't selling the card just because they want to keep it, they want to use it. So I would also be excited if I owned that card as well, definitely. The card I'm most excited about that I currently own, that's in the Philly team, is Anthony Fontana. I think he had a good season last year as an impact sub. He'd made a few starts, did okay. Mainly an impact guy. He's definitely seen as the heir apparent to Brendan Aronson, you know, so will he get more starts? Yes, I think he does. Can he go up to that same level? Time will tell, I suppose. What do you think about Fontana?
I think he's Aronson with goal upside. So if you look at like the minutes he had last season, he produced some good goals in that time. I think I'd say Aronson was a bit more consistent kind of. He's probably going to be more up and down than Aronson was, I would say. He might not have like the defensive side of the game as much on cue as Aronson would be, more of like a controlling player. I think Fontana's going to be more like trying to get the goals himself. So be interesting to see how that works with Prisbilko and Santos. But I think he's a pretty strong shout to have a good season.
Yeah, no, I'm with you there. When I watch him, he reminded me a little bit of what I've seen in Cole Bassett. You know, he's one of those midfielders that wants to get in the box, wants to get on the end of a cross, wants to get a tap in, wants to shoot from 18 yards. And I make you quite right. Players like that probably won't have the same base score as a Brendan Aronson, who will collect the ball from defence, beat a man pass. You know, he's not really that kind of guy, from what I've seen anyway. You know, I could be proven wrong. Sergio Santos I've got on screen also, and again, like last year, he was a real surprise. He was going really, really cheap for ages, and then his scores started flying away, and his price started really flying away as well, and that was towards that kind of playoff run. And he really did step up, because not a lot of people had, in MLS circles I'm talking, had a really high opinion of this guy until last year, you know, where he really did step up and make himself counted for. He's got a lot of greens, he does have a lot of reds. I think a lot of that's down to minutes, because his minutes were kind of all over the place last year, weren't they?
Yeah, I mean, right. Also, he has a toe ligament injury right now, so I mean, for a forward, that's a little concerning. I'd say they playing for Fontana as one of the forwards in yesterday's game, so that might be how they start the season, with Montero in kind of the hole behind them, and then Fleck as the defensive midfielder. So that, I mean, I don't know how long he's going to be out. I thought it was like a few weeks originally. So, I mean, that's something to look at. Because obviously with a toe injury for a football player is not ideal.
No, far from it. A guy you brought up earlier on who was a big SO5 favourite, Kai Wagner, probably one of the best fullbacks in SO5 last year in MLS. He did really well last year. Again, whenever I watched Philly, he was very adventurous, very attacking. He was almost like a right winger, you know, it just goes, you know. His price at the moment is still quite attractive at 0.17 for what you'll get from him. Delivers a lot of crosses to the box, gets to the byline often. And when you look at his SO5 scores, he's got a lot of high greens in there. But there is a good amount of reds in there. So he's one of those ones. I think he's priced quite accurately at the moment. But as we see Philly, actually, if they do start to replicate last season's form, maybe not quite supporter shield level like you said, but if they're definitely playoff level, a guy like this will run away in price and do very well in SO5.
I mean, there was a lot of talk of him going back to Europe in the postseason. So, I mean, I think Philly's pretty happy to have signed into a new contract. And he's lucky to have kept his leg yesterday after that. I don't know if you saw that tackle in the CONCACAF Champions League. That guy almost sawed him in half, and like that was a ridiculous touch.
It was absolutely ridiculous. I think in terms of the Philly team, the only other thing I would say, Andre Blake is probably, along with Eloy Room, maybe Stephen Fry and Galassi, probably the top goalkeepers to be picking up. Blake was my favourite last year. I think he's my favourite goalkeeper I've got in MLS anyway. But the number 2 behind him is Matthew Freeze. Andre Blake will go away with Jamaica for international football, so you do have quite a... So, as you'll probably remember, Blake broke his finger last year. I bought Joe Bendick because I thought he was number 2. He was number 2, played 1 match, didn't do that great. They then dropped him, and they played the number 3, who's Matthew Freeze, and he played 2 matches, maybe 3 matches. And the thing with Matthew Freeze is he's a Philly Academy guy. So they're always going to want to push him over the 32-year-old journeyman that they've got on the bench. So if you are looking for those backup goalkeepers, I think Matthew Freeze is probably one of the better ones to pick up, because you know Blake will go away on international duty. That will happen. And I think it's quite a safe bet that it'll be Freeze that steps into the void and covers those matches.
The problem is people are catching on with that, so the prices are
It's not cheap.
even for a backup goalkeeper, the price is kind of crazy. So
Yeah, 100%.
and he's young as well, so people are attracted to like the under 23 kind of
Element, totally.
part of him. So
And the last thing I would probably say about Philly before we look at their fixtures is they've signed, and I heard this guy's name last season for obvious reasons, but they've signed Brendan Arneson's little brother, Paxton Arneson. So we might get a card for him. We might see him start to debut, and you know, stranger things have happened in the world of football. He could be a talent also, so keep your eyes peeled for that.
yeah, he scored in the preseason game against Orlando.
Did he?
So
Fantastic.
yeah.
They're very happy to play their academy, Philly. That's kind of what they've built themselves on the last 10 years or so. And like I said, at the kind of the top of this little segment, they're really starting to feel the benefit of that now. Keeping a consistent coach, keeping a consistent philosophy, pumping money into the academy, and they're starting to really reap the benefits of that. Their fixtures to start the season off is quite 50-50. I suppose they're away at Columbus. That's a massive game. Supporter Shield holders versus MLS Cup holders. It's almost like a Super Cup. So that'll be a massive opening fixture. They then get 2 home games back to back. Miami, who we spoke about, or no finished article. New York, or not a finished article also. New York City. And then they go away to Chicago, at home at the Revs, and at home at the Bulls. So their first kind of opening 5 or 6 matches, they will have CONCACAF stuff to go on as well, of course. But I can see them getting 9 points quite easily.
Time.